Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Maverick News channel. Mexico. Under pressure. How serious is it? It depends on where you are in the matrix. Yeah, there's reality, and then there's reality. On the one hand, it looks like Mexico is about to fall, that the government there is about to collapse. On the other hand, all is well, nothing to see here. We'll look at both sides of that when we come back after this.
Maverick News isn't just a news outlet, it's a community of truth seekers. Your donation at freedomreporters.com fuels our mission to report the stories that mainstream media won't touch. Thank you, Maverick family.
So, Mexico. Trump, not a fan of Sheinbaum. The president, that much is very clear. Trump's not a fan of Justin Trudeau. He's not a fan of left-wing governments. He is at war, in my view, with liberalism, socialism, communism. There is a hardcore anti-communist bloc within the MAGA movement, and they have always been at odds with any government that is even left-leaning. Very pronounced, very obvious right now, as Trump tries to appease them with saber rattling up and down the coast of Venezuela, all through Latin America. Mexico now, we're told, is on the brink. And, you know, the MAGA movement is part of a larger global right-wing rise. You're seeing it in European countries. You're seeing it in Europe with the AfD, with the government of Viktor Orban. You're seeing it in Canada with some elements of the freedom movement. You're seeing it globally. And one of the organizations at the center of all this internationally is this Freedom Train International. That's the way I'm interpreting this. And Jim Ferguson, who has been posting over the past 24 hours about these huge protests, or at least we're told and shown what appear to be huge protests in Mexico. Jim Ferguson on X saying that Mexico has reached a point of no return. Mexico just crossed a point of no return. Mexico City is erupting, and tonight the world is watching a moment that will define the future of the entire region. The National Palace has been breached. Crowds have surged past security. the symbol of government power, overwhelmed. Now, this is from yesterday. He says, what you're seeing is not a protest. It's a warning shot to every nation sliding into crisis. When people reach a breaking point, they don't whisper, they erupt. This isn't just Mexico. This is the pressure valve of global instability finally blowing open. Governments should pay attention. Elites should pay attention, because what just happened in Mexico City is what happens when people decide they've had enough. Tonight, we witness more than chaos. We witness a turning point. And this won't stay contained. More to follow. Stay alert, stay informed, stay free. Interesting word. Free. Stay free. Whatever that means, I see people in every political camp use that word. You think about it, even Kamala Harris, the Democrats used the word freedom in their campaigns, but that's a sidebar. Let's look at the video. This posted by, interesting, isn't it, that the name of the live streamer or the live streaming outlet is mostly peaceful.media, mostly peaceful. Remember the summer of love and all of the riots in the streets in the US that were supposed to be mostly peaceful protests? Isn't that interesting? And yet this is being posted by a right-wing media influencer. So this is what Jim Ferguson is posting. Those are strong words, strong predictions. Thing is, I'm learning. As I've said before, I've always worked in media, but nothing really prepared me for what we are going through right now, because the internet, AI, all of this stuff, it is new. And as much as I know how media works, it's an education every day. So I'm very cautious, and I'm very cautious about all of this. The reason I'm cautious is because we've seen this exact scenario play out before many times in recent years, where we're told this country is about to fall, or this government is about to fall, or a protest is held and we're told that it's major, but it ends up not being that consequential. Here's another video, another angle. Jesus. Okay. No question, this is very serious and it is violent. That just looks violent to me. It doesn't look mostly peaceful. But that makes me wonder why, if we go to, let's go to CTV and look what the headlines are here today. Now, keep in mind that this was yesterday, but I didn't see much in the way of headlines or stories about this on mainstream media here in Canada or the US. So all that's going on down in Mexico, and yet mainstream media, it's like, where is it? Where is the story? I'm looking. Let's go looking. Where is it? Is it anywhere? There's a new photo released as King Charles turned 77. We're getting into old news there. There's the Marjorie Taylor Greene story because she's feuding with Donald Trump. Carney visits Riderville ahead of the 2025 Grey Cup. Chris Boyd shot outside New York City restaurant, source says. Industry leader says pressures are hitting Canadian manufacturing. Canadian man dies trying to save his 5-year-old daughter swept into ocean in California. That's a very sad story. Let's go to CBC. And when we're done here, we'll go check the US side. Where's the Mexico story? Where is it? Okay, here we go. So how serious is this situation in Mexico? Is the government there really about to fall? If they reached a point of no return, as Mr. Ferguson says? One moment, let's take a little break, and we'll be right back.
Maverick News isn't just a news outlet, it's a community of truth seekers. Your donation at freedomreporters.com fuels our mission to report the stories that mainstream media won't touch. Thank you, Maverick family.
Yeah, just somebody sending me something about this story. I'm just getting to make a point here. And there have been stories about this, no question about it. But I just want to highlight the fact that it's not getting that much play in the media here in Canada or the US. So let's go to NBC. And there's no doubt in my mind that what's going on down there is very serious. But how serious? Well, depends on your perspective. And I'll tell you right now that our perception is being managed, or at least we have conflicting, competing interests trying to manipulate our perception about what is going on, not just in Mexico tonight, but also in Venezuela and all through Latin America, because that whole area is in play. Here's NBC. Where's the story? Another U.S. military announcement involving another strike, the 21st one. We were going to get to this as well. The 21st strike on an alleged narco-terrorist boat in the Eastern Pacific. So we're going to come back to that. But why is Mexico not getting more play? Well, I don't know. I have my suspicions. Let me take a little break. I'm going to come back and we're going to show you where we're going with this. Stay with me.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
So the thing is, I've been hearing for at least a year and a half, chatter among the ultra conservative MAGA core about taking action militarily against drug cartels inside Mexico. We've seen the escalation of U.S. military buildup on the Mexican border. The approach has changed with the Trump administration, where they are no longer just looking to combat drug cartels using law enforcement mechanisms and cross-border cooperation. They're turning it into military action and classifying cartels and drug dealers, drug traffickers, international drug traffickers as narco terrorists, which then, in their view, gives them license to take whatever actions they deem necessary, because they're categorizing this now as an attack on the United States. So yesterday, we did indeed have some reference to this story through CBC on the Canadian side to the massive, well, I don't know how massive, they're big. I don't like to use the word massive unless I can get real perspective on this. But these were big protests, violent protests, as you saw. But very likely ramped up, fueled by political interests, manipulating people, managing perception, and motivating them through manipulation online. We know that this is how these things are done these days, especially if you want to go to war without actually going to war, or if you want to destabilize a government in order to get regime change without actually physically sending in troops to do it. You get the people to rise up. That's what that's what's done. You can describe it as a color revolution if you want, a revolution, a protest, whatever, however you want to describe it or categorize it. This is a situation that falls right into this model. CBC here saying anti-government protesters clash with riot police in Mexico City during Gen Z-led rally, and President Claudia Sheinbaum accuses right-wing groups of infiltrating government. Right-wing groups. A large protest against insecurity and government corruption turned violent in Mexico City on Saturday as demonstrators clashed with riot police outside the National Palace. I'm reading the story. Thousands of protesters marched on the Angel of Independence monument through several streets and avenues before reaching the Zocalo, the capital's main square, where the National Palace, the home and office of President Claudia Sheinbaum, is located. Tensions exploded when masked protesters tore down metal barriers protecting the palace, prompting riot police to respond with tear gas and smoke bombs. Demonstrators pushed and kicked the fences, while some hurled stones at officers. The demonstration, organized primarily by Generation Z or Z, if you're Canadian, youth groups, drew citizens protesting specific cases of violence, including the assassination of Yuru Apan. I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry. I've covered this. I had the same problem before. I need to learn how to pronounce the name. This Mexican mayor, Carlos Manzo. We reported on it on that day. And I was concerned that might be an Archduke Ferdinand moment. And indeed, it seems like that's what's going on down in Mexico right now. Because that seems to be the spark that has lit the fire. Participants waving Mexican flags voiced frustration over deteriorating security conditions and government corruption. We need more security, said Andres Massa, a 29-year-old business consultant who carried the pirate skull flag that has become a global symbol of Gen Z protests. Global symbol of Gen Z protests. Who's backing those guys up? In several countries this year, members of the demographic group born between the late 1990s and early 2010s have organized protests against inequality, democratic backsliding, and corruption. The largest Gen Z protests took place in Nepal in September following a ban on social media and led to the resignation of that nation's prime minister. Isn't that interesting? So this is a powerful little group. Well, they ain't so little. In Mexico, many young people say they are frustrated with systemic problems like corruption and impunity for violent crimes. Now, Sheinbaum, it says here, still has high approval ratings despite a recent spate of high-profile murders that include the assassination of Manzo, a popular mayor in the western state of Michoacan. In the days leading up to Saturday's protest, Sheinbaum accused right-wing parties of trying to infiltrate the Gen Z movement and of using bots on social media to increase attendance. There it is. Sheinbaum accused right-wing parties of trying to infiltrate the Gen Z movement and of using bots on social media, to try to increase attendance. Advertising or manipulation? This week, some Gen Z social media influencers said they no longer backed Saturday's protests, while elderly figures like former President Vicente Fox and Mexican billionaire Ricardo Salinas Pliego published messages in support of the protests. So is it a protest or is it an attempt to overthrow the government? Kind of gives you a little echo of the Freedom Convoy, doesn't it? Saturday's march was attended by people from several age groups, with supporters of Manzo attending the protests wearing the straw hats that symbolize his political movement. These kinds of accusations from Sheinbaum about infiltration, influence, those sorts of things, they go back months. Let me see if I can find this for you here. Sheinbaum. Yeah, here we are. Mexican President Sheinbaum. Accuses the U.S. of harboring drug cartels. This goes back to February of this year. I will show you. Now you have to put this into perspective, okay? So you've had for, like I said, at least a year and a half, 2 years, and I'm sure this is probably even longer than that, but this is when I started to find it on my radar. The hardcore right in the MAGA movement calling for military intervention in Mexico and using, this is sort of like chatter in the background. And this was going on even when Trump wasn't in office, when they were running what I view as sort of a shadow government, an opposition party, a government in waiting. And they were talking about Operation Sinaloa even then. I've run clips here of them talking about it in the past. And here's Sheinbaum back in February 14th, Valentine's Day, as a matter of fact, saying they're accusing the U.S. of harboring drug cartels and claims American citizens are working with organized crime groups in Mexico following U.S. President Trump's slanderous claims earlier this month, in February, that Mexico had joined forces with drug traffickers. So you see, this whole narrative has been out there for a long time, and it's a drip, drip, drip perception management, creating or manufacturing public consent for whatever action the government, in this case, the Trump administration, wants to take. And in this case, against Mexico and other Latin American countries, including Venezuela, I would say. But who do you believe? Is it that Sheinbaum is guilty, or that the Mexican government is not being effective in combating drug cartels? And is she complicit, or is the government of Mexico collaborating with them? Is she part of the problem? Is the government there facilitating the drug trade and the drug trafficking to the United States, therefore could be accused of attacking the US? That's what we're hearing out of the Trump administration with regard to Venezuela. This exact same rhetoric. And yet Trump keeps saying it's fentanyl, but we know that there's no fentanyl really that comes out of Venezuela to the United States. We know that it's cocaine primarily, and that some of the cocaine actually comes from other countries and might flow through Venezuela. But those boats themselves don't have enough fuel on board to reach the United States, not those boats. As pointed out by Rand Paul, there are a lot of holes in this narrative, but that doesn't stop the administration from blowing boats out of the water. Who should we believe? It makes it very difficult to know what the truth is, doesn't it? Especially in this day and age when we have social media feeding us information into our own little silos, where we are fed information, largely information that we agree with, that reinforces our biases. It's information that mostly makes us feel better or confirms our bias or biases. And then every once in a while, they give you something that's really angry, makes you upset, to keep you engaged. And this keeps the endorphins pumping while you're sucked into the matrix that we today call the internet. Here, Eric Daughtry reposting the latest video showing alleged narco drug terrorists on the high seas getting blown out of the water. Breaking: Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announces 21st strike on narco terrorists trying to kill Americans. There are now at least 80 people killed from these strikes. 80 people. The U.S. military is defending the American hemisphere. Oh, okay. Well, let's look at the video. I caution you, this is a video that does show something involving real human beings. And we should keep that in mind. Let's bring it back with audio.
Southcom says 3 men in that boat were killed. It comes as the Navy's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, has arrived in the Caribbean. Madeline Rivera is outside the White House with more. Madeline.
Hey, John. Well, there are now at least 80 people killed from these boat strikes. And according to U.S. Southern Command, they say that this vessel was being operated by a designated terrorist organization, and that intelligence confirmed that the vessel was involved in illicit narcotics smuggling, transiting along with a narco trafficking route. So this comes, as you said, with the USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier. It is now in the Caribbean. And this is joining the military buildup that has gathered in the region. The administration says the U.S. operation, formerly named Southern Spear, aims to remove narco terrorists, but there has been bipartisan concern.
Today in the Eastern Pacific, Southcom says 3 men in that boat were killed.
So Another one, 21 boats, 80 people killed in these strikes. And it has changed the relationship between the United States and some of its closest allies. Interestingly, during the G7 Foreign Ministers Conference over the past week or so, right? When Rubio was questioned about Venezuela and some of these other controversial actions the U.S. government through Trump has been taking, he said that the other foreign ministers never brought the subject matter up. I thought that in itself was very telling. Now, let me see here. Here we go. Here's Spy Week or Spy Talk, a prominent Substack account that generates a pretty large following. And they're referencing the changing relationship between the United States and some of its closest allies, specifically the UK, Canada, and some others who are now refusing to share certain intelligence information with the US. Here's the headline. Rifts with spy allies over Venezuela. Cash lights MI5. Rubio targets foreign Antifa. The UK and Canada have suspended intelligence sharing with the US over the Trump administration's attacks on boats in the Caribbean and Pacific, CNN reported. Dutch intelligence officials previously said they were restricting sharing over concerns about the politicization of intelligence and human rights violations. Time reminded, Time magazine. Sometimes, or well, Time News now, because it's not just the magazine. Sometimes you have to think on a case-by-case basis. Can I still share this information or not? Said Eric Ackerboom, Director General of the AIVD, the General Intelligence and Security Service of the Netherlands, in an interview with Dutch outlet De Volkskrant on October 18th. We cannot say what we do or do not share, but we are more critical. So what countries have stopped sharing? Well, the United Kingdom for sure. They've suspended sharing of intelligence on suspected drug trafficking vessels in the Caribbean with Pentagon. The pause began over a month ago, shortly after strikes started in September. UK officials believe the strikes breach international law and do not warrant, or rather do not want, to risk complicity. Intelligence from UK territories in the region is affected, but broader Five Eyes cooperation continues unaffected. Colombia has ordered suspension of all intelligence sharing with the U.S. security agencies by public security forces. Announced on November 12, 2025 this year by President Gustavo Petro. Canada has explicitly stated as well that it does not want its intelligence used for targeting boats in deadly strikes while continuing non-lethal cooperation with the U.S. Coast Guard under Operation Caribbean. We did report on that. And this is a de facto withholding, but not a full suspension. Other nations, including France, have publicly criticized the strikes as illegal, but have not reported suspending intelligence sharing. No other countries in the EU or G7 have confirmed similar halts based on available reports. So this really does highlight these new and I'd say rare strains in U.S. alliances, and it's all because of what's going on with the Trump administration, with the strikes framed by the Trump administration as essential to combat narco-terrorism, but viewed by critics as disproportionate and legally dubious. And the trick here, this sleight of hand, digitally speaking, is to say, oh no, we're not going to war. with Venezuela or anyone else. Remember, it was a week ago that Trump said that on 60 Minutes. And yet, I don't know what you call it when you start blowing boats out of the water with missiles and you bring, well, I don't know what percentage of the U.S. Navy is now off the coast of Venezuela. And we're looking at in a situation where Trump has confirmed he's actually sent the CIA in to engage in covert activities, undercover, secret, but now not so secret operations inside Venezuela. This will go to a commercial here. We'll let that run. So I'm going to let the clip go here in a moment. And this is part of, I would say, the perception management.
Are we going to war against Venezuela?
I doubt it. I don't think so, but they've been treating us very badly.
Are Maduro's days as president numbered?
I would say, yeah. I think so, yeah.
And this issue of potential land strikes in Venezuela, is that true?
I don't tell you that. I mean, I'm not saying it's true or untrue, but I wouldn't.
Why would we
I wouldn't
do
be
it?
inclined to say that I would do that, but because I don't talk to a reporter about whether or not I'm going to strike.
But he's not ruling it out. He says, I don't think so. As he puts the Navy off the coast of Venezuela. What is war in 2025? You see, it all falls into place if you look at it through that lens that I keep trying to present to you of the world's great powers, the United States, Russia, China, India. But those three, United States, Russia, and China, just carving the world up into spheres of dominance, international dominance. And we've seen that attitude reflected in the comments from Marco Rubio at the G7 Foreign Ministers Conference in Canada over the past week, where he acknowledged that the other foreign ministers never mentioned what's going on in Venezuela. Yeah, because they don't want to get Trump upset because they're taking a stand on it, but they don't want to talk about it because all of our countries are vulnerable against the United States. You don't want to piss off Godzilla, especially if you live right on their doorstep, like Canada does. But Marco Rubio said, when asked by a journalist about what's going on in Venezuela, that the United States has the right to do what it's doing. And I'm paraphrasing, and I don't have the clip lined up. I ran it the other night. But basically, the United States has the right to do what it wants because Venezuela is in its hemisphere. And the United States is under attack by these narco terrorists. And so that's why the actions being taken are justified. And when asked about criticism from international other countries, and including countries from the EU, he says, well, they don't get to make the rules. And so this whole concept that we've lived under since the end of World War II about an international rules-based order or cooperation between nations or nation states, with the United States on the Western side taking the lead to protect freedom, to protect everybody, and to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons by entrusting the United States as the lead nuclear power with the nukes and with the technology to deliver them more than any other country, we've left ourselves vulnerable. And that now is coming home to roost. And it's a very real threat to everyone because you're seeing the United States under Trump and this, and it all starts to make sense when you start to look at it through the lens that I present to you. They pull back. They don't care what happens to Ukraine, really. They don't care what happens to Europe, really. That's up to them. What happens, happens. They'll supply weapons, they'll sell, because that's not their sphere of influence. So they'll do that, but they don't really care anymore. But here, that's why you're seeing the U.S. Navy pull back and take up position off the coast of Venezuela, because Trump is just, look, I mean, it's plain as day. It's the writing's right in front of you. Just don't believe your lying eyes, I guess. But Panama, as soon as he was in office, wanted to assert U.S. control over Panama. Did it through a business transaction. He's trying to do it with tariffs, using that as his main weapon. That's the main difference between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0. He's being very aggressive because he's running out of time. He might be able to run again, but he knows for sure that, you know, he has this amount of time. Whether he'll be able to extend his presidency for another 4 years or beyond, that remains to be seen. But he's in a rush. Asserts U.S. control over Panama, goes after Greenland right away. That's still in play, by the way. We're just not hearing about it in the media that much anymore, but it's still very much in play. That's why Canada has pivoted to extend more diplomatic relations and strengthen ties with Denmark because of Greenland just within the past week. You're seeing the pressure on Canada to become the 51st state. You're seeing I've told you, I've been hearing the back channel chatter about Operation Sinaloa, attacking Mexico using the U.S. military, but not Mexico, the drug cartels. But you see, if the government is then accused of being in bed with the drug cartels, now suddenly you have justification to unseat the government. Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, all of the Latin American countries, Greenland, Panama, Canada. Canada's the big one. It all fits very nicely as well if with anyone who looks at it through the lens of the rise of the technocracy and a global government. Where the world is carved up into spheres of influence. It's the same thing. And this is largely coming from Russia because they have been pushing toward this exact same thing. You're with Russia with an eye toward European or Eurasian domination. And only recently has Putin's brain, Alexander Dugin, pivoted away from Russia dominating all of Eurasia to acknowledging China as a major player and saying, yes, China should get their own carve out as well. Before that, it was basically dividing the world in half. Now it's a three-sphere geopolitical realignment that really evolves the whole multipolar geopolitical reality that we've been told that we have to embrace or that is coming. It's coming. It's underway. I don't know how far they'll get, but they're trying right now. That, in my view, is really what's going on down in Mexico. And it's not like some bizarre conspiracy theory, shadowy, strange psyop thing. It's just that they have become far better at using the internet and psychological manipulation in order to get what they want, in order to push for political change, to destabilize entire governments. And they do have a government in waiting that's more to their liking. You see, because it isn't so much just about taking over a country. It's about getting a government in power that is in alignment with your political goals, that aligns with you ideologically, and hopefully you can control. Here is Venezuela's opposition leader to the military. Don't be the regime's weapon. We rise against a criminal regime that's on its way out. They've torn families apart, suffocated us on purpose, and starved our people. But the worst hostages are those forced to carry out this cruelty, destroying the lives of their own brothers and sisters. The decisive hour is near. The position each person takes will mark their life forever. Be a hero, not a criminal. Be a source of pride, not shame for your family. Maria Corina Machado. Let's let this roll. I've got the audio. And who's backing Maria up?
El rugido de esta tierra que queridos venezolanos, el rugido de esta tierra que exige libertad crece y resuena dentro y fuera del país. 30 millones nos rebelamos ante un régimen criminal que va de salida. Un régimen que tiene como rehenes a nuestros héroes, los presos políticos, y a todo un país secuestrado. Nos han separado de nuestras familias, nos asfixian, intencionalmente matan de hambre a nuestra gente. Pero en el fondo,
all this is
los
happening
peores rehenes
at the same time.
Son aquellos a quienes obligan a ejecutar.
And the governments that are under pressure are all left-leaning, socialist governments. In virtually every case, when the hardcore right from the MAGA movement, I'd say pretty much the entire MAGA movement, makes reference to any of these governments. This is Spanish, so we'll pull out. When you hear any reference to any of these governments, they're referred to as communist. You're hearing that same incorrect rhetoric leveled against Canada. Canada's communist government. You're hearing it from Alex Jones. You're hearing it from freedom movement influencers from Canada of late who are referring to the Canadian government, Canada's liberal government, socialist leaning. Yes, socialist. Yes, we have a socialist kind of government in Canada, but still a capitalist government. But they refer to Canada as a communist regime. The language is chosen carefully for a reason. They refer to all of these governments as communist dictatorships. It makes me wonder how accurate my perceptions are and how accurate they've been with regard to communist regimes, current and past. Maybe even through my childhood. How conditioned have I been in the way that I view these governments? How I went to Cuba and I didn't really like it. I've always considered myself a conservative, but not in the way that MAGA has evolved into a really far right. It's not conservative. In fact, it's gone so far radicalized that you're seeing influencers for quite some time refer to even MAGA communism. MAGA is not a conservative movement. It's a populist movement that brings the extremes together. I've been calling that kind of political convergence communofascism. Others are calling it now MAGA communism because it's not that it's communist. It's the combination of MAGA and this, I would say, right-wing socialist movement, populist movement, and the left, if you want to look at it from the left-right perspective. I say they're both on the left, both authoritarian or oriented more toward more authoritarianism and unitary executive power. And this is what's playing out. And that is why you're getting this kind of foreign policy. And while you're seeing it online and you see people being, I'd say, manipulated online, not just here, but abroad, so much so that you see people, peasants, regular people, middle class people, people just like you and I, down in Mexico, take to the streets, rising up to do the dirty work for the elites, the rich and the powerful, and those seeking to be richer or more powerful, to seize power from others who are in power using violent means, and they want you to do their dirty work. And that's why you have 120 people injured in the streets in Mexico tonight. Do you think those people are acting out of free will or of sound mind? When I see what's going on in Canada right now, I get very worried because I'm seeing the same mania play out over and over again, and it mirrors what we're seeing here. It mirrors what we see in other countries as well. And the United States is not the only country that manipulates people using these methods. Not at all. Russia does it. China does it. Every major power does it. They have entire wings of intelligence that work to do exactly this kind of thing. In some cases, they call them color revolutions. And it's difficult to know who's really behind it because sometimes it's more than one entity, more than one government. Sometimes it's even private businesses, large corporations, or NGOs that funnel money into these things to fuel protests, to affect political change. I would say that what we're seeing happening in Mexico right now is not organic, that it was coordinated, it was funded, it was put together by a foreign government or governments and or political activists internationally in order to get people into the streets, rise up against Sheinbaum as part of the larger global war against liberalism. That's what's going on in Venezuela. That's what's going on in Mexico. That's what's going on in Colombia. That's what's going on in Panama. That's what's going on in Greenland. That's what's going on in Canada. But don't think that electing Pierre Poilievre would have made a hell of a lot of a difference. Maybe just in the way that it would happen. You deserve to know. Anybody else telling you any of this? Anybody? Bob Ray on Truth, Trump, and social media as he leaves his UN post. This is a clip. CBC. It's up tonight. A lot of this kind of manipulation of people depends on perception management. What do we see with the Trump administration? Nothing seems to be real. Everything is exaggeration. There might be a kernel of truth, but it's, wrapped up inside a lie or a bunch of lies. When the jobs numbers come out, if they aren't favorable, Trump just gets them cooked so that they are favorable. It doesn't matter how bad something is. If he's responsible, it's the best ever. If something great happens, it's the greatest ever. It doesn't matter. If somebody, we saw before, people get fired simply because they reported the truth and just came out with the statistics on unemployment stats and job losses. Didn't like that. So the person who reported those stats got fired, and then the numbers were revised. Bob Rae, former Premier of Ontario, has been working at the UN talking about Trump.
If you've got a group of people who say there is no such thing as truth, truth is all relative and who knows what truth is. And then they say that, oh, by the way, there's no such thing as misinformation, no such thing as disinformation, and no such thing as science, or at least, the science is kind of iffy. We don't really follow the science. Climate change doesn't really exist. It's mythology. I mean, when the president of the United States talked some of that language at the UN, it should have been a moment when everybody just takes their breath in and say, holy moly, we are dealing with an attempt to unroll the universe since Galileo, and you sort of say this is this is crazy, and so we are really having to fight back on many fronts, and these are the fronts we need to fight back on. We can't afford to be vague or unclear about the importance of the facts, the importance of truth, the importance of understanding how propaganda works, how professional lying works, and how deeply embedded propaganda and professional lying are in the world of social media. They are deeply embedded in those technologies. And so the people who are running those technologies have got a hell of a responsibility on their hands, because they are allowing things to be perpetrated which have no relationship to the truth.
Now, to be sure, there is a political element to some of those issues, like climate change. Companies latch on to these things. Governments come up with big grants and subsidies. There's corruption that follows or flows from that. The way Canada's Constitution is written, environmental issues or enforcement of environmental law falls to the government, while resource management and ownership falls to provinces. Therefore, that's why Alberta is so opposed to any kind of climate change legislation, because that is where the federal government asserts its authority over resources like oil. You have to understand the Constitution to understand that. But they don't talk about that. Who's they? The government. Perception management, truth. That's truth. And how truth is used, or how lies are told to manage your perception, results in how you behave. They use this kind of propaganda information to get you into the streets, to rise up. Right now, they want you hating your government. Who's they? The people who want to unseat the government, the people who want to affect change, the people, right now, I would say the Trump administration, engaging in exactly that kind of propaganda to destabilize many governments as they push toward this goal of creating a greater America. Do you want to go out into the streets and fight for that? Is that really what you're upset about? Ask yourself. I've had people, and I hate to even bring the subject up again, but I've had people just over the past, well, actually, it's been ongoing and getting worse. People ready to give up on their country and actually want to rise up. I've had people phoning me saying they want to rise up against Canada because of the ostriches. So they want to throw in the towel, turn their back on their entire country, and rise up against the government because some birds got the bird flu and ended up being culled. More upset about that than 80 people getting blown to bits in boats on the high seas just because the Trump administration has decided they have the authority to do it. And what are you going to do about it? Nothing. You can't do anything because they have so much power. So might is right. Sending a message internationally, and you ask some people and they go, that's great. Is it? Is that a free society? Is that really what you support? No due process, no trial. You don't even know who the people are on those vessels, on those boats blown up with missiles. You see a picture of a boat. You don't know who's on board. We've heard accusations, including from, I think, the president of Colombia, saying that at least one of those boats had civilians on board who were not guilty of anything. They were fishermen. That's what he says. But who do you believe? It's all perception management. Is this a cup? Is this a cup? I say it's a cup, but you could say that's not a cup. That's a piece of clay. Or you could say that it doesn't even exist, that it's a holograph, that it's AI, that I'm not even really here. You could tell somebody that I'm completely fake. And you could convince people of that if you get enough people to repeat the lie often enough. Perception management. So is Claudia Sheinbaum a drug lord? Is Canada a major supplier to the United States of fentanyl? No. Does some fentanyl flow to the United States from Canada? Yeah, probably a bit, but a whole lot more comes the other way. And I've shown you the stats on that, but you don't have to believe it. A lot of people don't because Trump says otherwise. And if Trump just says it, and then it's backed up by social media influencers who keep on telling you that over and over again, or you get some washed up journalist to write a bunch of articles, and then you amplify them over and over and over again, you start to believe it just because you get this flood of repetition, frequency, bias confirmation. And you view some of these people as being credible because some of them have been in the past, former media people, influencers who previously were independent and had come out with truth or say they're telling you the truth, and in many cases did convey truth, but later became compromised because of the money. So they recruit these people and they create networks, information networks, some of which are fake as hell. It's not just the United States, it's Russia too. And if they keep using the word communist, 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 and you've been, as I have been, conditioned to fear communism, I've learned I'm not afraid of communism or communists. I have friends who are communists. I'm not in favor of communism. I don't agree with communism. I don't support communism. I find it I view it as an authoritarian ideology by default. But I also recognize exaggeration and fear mongering. And so when they call the government of Mexico a communist regime or the government of Canada a communist regime, I know that that is just political exaggeration designed to get you upset. Mexico does not have a communist government under Claudia Sheinbaum. Her administration is left-leaning and continues the social welfare and populist policies of her predecessor, Andre Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO. It operates as a multi-party democracy with a market-oriented economy. It's not a communist system. Mexico remains a federal presidential republic with competitive elections, separation of powers, and protections for private property and free enterprise. Sheinbaum took office back in October of 2024. She was elected with about 60% of the vote as the candidate of the Marina Party, the National Regeneration Movement. It's a center-left party focused on anti-corruption, poverty reduction, and nationalism. Her government is described by analysts as social democratic or populist left, somewhere around between the Democrats and the MAGA movement, but more to the left. More like what an RFK Jr. government probably would have been like had he become president. Her government emphasizes programs like universal pensions, cash transfers to low-income families, and infrastructure investments, keeping in mind that Trump also referred to RFK Jr. as a communist at one time. It maintains strong ties to global trade. Oh, also Bernie Sanders as a communist. He refers to Bernie Sanders as a communist, not a social democrat. Anyway, yeah, Mexico and their government maintains strong ties to global trade, including the USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement, and that prioritizes capitalist monopolies and foreign investment directly at odds with communist principles of state ownership and anti-capitalism. But there it is, integrated, woven into the economy. Mexico's economy is capitalist, with private sector dominance in industries like manufacturing, energy, and services. Sheinbaum's policies include expanding passenger rail and education access, but they do not involve nationalizing industries or abolishing private enterprise. In fact, we've seen through the use of tariffs, Trump asserting a degree of ownership, if not control, over many corporations, insisting that the government get a stake in some of these companies. I've heard them talking about it in clips that we've run on this program. That makes them more communist than the government of Mexico. You think Trump's a conservative? I thought for a while that he'd seen the light and had pivoted away from the Democrat side and the socialist leanings over there, but no, not in Trump 2.0. In fact, the Sheinbaum administration has pursued nearshoring to attract U.S. and foreign factories, boosting profitability for businesses. Communist parties of Mexico, such as the Communist Party of Mexico, actively criticize Sheinbaum's government as anti-worker and a continuation of social democracy, not a true leftist revolution. Not left enough for them. They view it as prioritizing corporate interests over workers' rights. Sheinbaum has personal ties to leftist movements, however. I mean, her family has historical links to the Communist Party. She emerged from 1980s student activism. However, Marina, the party, is not a communist party. It's a broad coalition. It includes socialists, but operates within democratic norms. It isn't really that much different than the MAGA movement. Claims of imminent communism come from conservative critics. Some Catholic leaders or U.S.-based commentators who equate expanded social programs with authoritarian socialism. For instance, Sheinbaum's government has increased tariffs on Chinese imports and negotiated with Trump on border security and trade, showing pragmatic alignment with capitalist partners. It's interesting. I've said that even China, even though they do have a communist government, is more capitalistic than even the United States in many respects. Internationally, they're much easier to do trade with. Mexico under Sheinbaum maintains a non-interventionist foreign policy. They support diplomatic resolutions, for example, a two-state solution for Israel-Palestine, and granting asylum in cases like Peru's former PM. And while Marina has ties with Cuba's Communist Party, it's diplomatic cooperation, not an endorsement of communism domestically. Sheinbaum has met with leaders like Xi Jinping, as has Carney for Canada, and Emmanuel Macron, balancing relations without ideological overhaul. In the Mexico's government is progressive and welfare oriented, but firmly democratic and capitalist. Not so if you listen to the radical right side of the MAGA movement, and maybe even the greater MAGA movement, which now has been conditioned to believe that Mexico has a communist regime, therefore justifying pretty much any action the United States and Trump wants to take against Mexico, therefore justifying the use of information warfare to get people motivated and out into the streets to rise up against their own government. And who the hell knows is really behind it, because it isn't just Trump, it's an international movement. And I just point out again, who was posting most vigorously, aggressively, saying that Mexico is, well, here it is. Let's go back to Mr. Ferguson. What's he post? What's he saying? How's he characterizing this? Right there. His words. Mexico is erupting right now. The National Palace of Mexico City is being overrun by furious protesters. And up here he says, Mexico just crossed the point of no return. This is to say that Mexico is going to fall, or the Mexican government is going to fall. This also from yesterday, palace under attack, all-out battle in the Zocalo. Patriots are clashing head-on with riot police, defending the presidential palace. He's saying this stuff because he wants the government to fall. He's part of the information war, and he's on the anti-communist he's part of the war on liberalism internationally, Freedom Train International, and he's trying to help it along here with his posts. Or is he just being accurate? Or both? Or is the mainstream media ignoring it because they don't want to show you this, because that helps it along? And so by ignoring it or not giving it as much coverage, they diminish the impact of this information getting out. It depends on your perspective. Which is it? What's truth? Was this enough to unseat Sheinbaum? Is it enough? Well, this is yesterday. Is Sheinbaum's government still in power? We've seen reports 120 people injured as a result of the protest, which clearly, to some degree anyway, turned violent. But is the government still standing today? Is Jim Ferguson posting anything about it today? Let's go back. Let's look at his posts from today. And you can like Jim Ferguson if you want. I'm not criticizing. I'm just pointing out. He's got a bias. He's got an agenda. He's part of an international movement that brings it all together. MAGA, Tommy Robinson in the UK, all these right-wing political movements, including the freedom movement in Kazakhstan. Does that mean we're a communist government because I call it Kazakhstan? I say it tongue-in-cheek. Socialist, yes. Communist, no. Authoritarian, you be the judge. Does it justify foreign influence, foreign interference in our political affairs? Is any foreign interference justified anywhere? Is Jim Ferguson still talking about Mexico today? Let's scroll down. Pushing back on globalist control, speech, border sovereignty, founder of Freedom Train International, international ambassador, Advance UK. Ferguson, Edward Snowden's chilling warning is now unfolding in real time. What China built is exactly what Western governments are quietly preparing for. Snowden is crystal clear. Every photo, every purchase, every message, every movement, all of it being fed into algorithms. We'll come back to that in a moment. Jim Ferguson, when the state ignores the people fight back. Crowborough revolts. How serious is this one? Looks pretty darn serious. Big crowd there. United against the government's plan to dump 600 illegal migrants into their quiet community, he says. Immigration, the international issue. It's not just here. This is the issue that they're using internationally to fuel the movement. But do you really want to go to war? Or are we already at war? I'd say we are. Which side are you on? Do you want to pick a side? Do you want to participate? Who's really manipulating whom? See, the way I'm looking at things these days is the matrix already exists. It is the internet. It is an alternate reality where all things are possible, where truth becomes obscured, elusive, more elusive than it is on the outside world. And it's elusive enough out here. When I say out here, I guess I'm already in there. I'm already in here with you. Where all things are possible. Anything you want to believe can be true in the internet, in the World Wide Web, in the matrix. Where today you're fed propaganda and truth, a mix of both, lies. And here on X, well, I find Grok seems to be truthful and accurate, more so than many of the other AI services out there. I do find it makes mistakes. And that being said, X itself, because it purports to be a free speech platform, there's very little in terms of control in here. More than that, it's the way the algorithms work. It's what they feed you, what they want you to see. Who's they? Is it your government? Maybe not, because it's this international political movement that is fighting with these other political movements to get your attention. And the algorithm is being used to feed you whatever it wants you to see. It's making choices for you. You do not have free will here in the matrix unless you become very aware of how this stuff works. British women are being hunted and the elite call it progress. That's his headline. Does that get you angry? Sure does. Alert, Britain on the brink. This will turn violent. So Britain's on the brink too. About to fall? If it's on the brink, is it? Is Britain about to fall? Professor David Betts, 25-year in war studies at King's College London, now says the UK has crossed the threshold. His words are razor sharp. We are past the point which normal politics can solve this. Let's listen.
I mean,
Are you ready to rise up the way they did or are right now in Mexico?
I mean, immigration in the last few years, more than ever in the UK, has become the number one topic that's upsetting, that the average person feels the elites are not listening to them about.
Yeah. I didn't mean to laugh. What that laugh you just heard was a defense mechanism. It wasn't a genuine laugh because the answer is far from amusing, and that is there isn't anything they can do. This is baked in. We're already past the tipping point, is my estimation. By tipping point, so here I should be precise.
Are we? Are we past the tipping point? Does that mean that something terrible is inevitable? We keep hearing talk about even things like civil war. I got a blog post from Major General Vallely just in the past day talking about civil war again. I'm not so sure we're past the tipping point. I don't want to have a civil war. I don't want to go to war. I don't have to. Do you? Do you want to? Do you know what that means? Who's pushing for this? Is it one side, both sides? I'm hearing it from both sides. That's the scary thing. But who's controlling the narrative? Who's controlling the algorithm? Elon Musk, Donald Trump, the Democrats, Biden. They talk about, Bob Ray said that these social media companies have a very, they have a big responsibility in the way that they manage their companies and manage the information flow. And yet when I see all the social media elites, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, all of them sitting there at a table with Trump, you know what it says to me? They've all been captured. They do the bidding of the government because the government holds the key to regulation and money. You think that Elon Musk is purging the deep state? He is the deep state, the new technocratic deep state. He has made more money from government grants than anyone. He's the guy who was supposed to go in and clean up corruption. He is the military industrial complex. And he has the most valuable weapon of all the data. He got all the data through Doge. Alert, shock revelation, says right here. Jim Ferguson says so. The government is training to crush a future uprising. Out on the marshes of Gravesend, hidden from the public, the state has built something shocking. A fake British town, empty houses, fake shops, a dummy tube station, even a fake Indian restaurant. No residents, no commuters, no diners, just a dead hollow town, built for one purpose, to train police for urban warfare against the British public. Officers are being drilled on house-to-house fighting, forced entry into family homes, street-level conflict in a British neighborhood, live fire response to mass unrest. This isn't counterterrorism, it's counter-population training. Really? I guess it depends on how you spin it. I don't know the story, but my guess is there's another side to this one. Says the mask is slipping and the British people are waking up. Are they? Are we? What reality will you choose? Jim Ferguson's? Donald Trump's? Claudia Sheinbaum's? In the Matrix, all things are possible. Because they say so. And when they say it enough, you believe it. You will believe it. Believe anything. They can make you believe anything. Maybe not you, but a lot of people. Because they can fool all of the people a lot of the time. And maybe just long enough to get us to do things we might live to regret later.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So here's Trump tonight talking about Maduro. Talk is cheap, I guess, but he says Maduro would like to talk, and he says, we'll see how that turns out. Here's the clip. I think if you share the oil, Nicholas, you might have a better chance of surviving politically, or maybe even just surviving.
And we may be having some discussions with Maduro, and we'll see how that turns out. They would like to talk. And
where did all this stuff start? You know, governments, large, powerful governments, superpowers, have always resorted to manipulation. But the turn of the internet, the emergence of the internet, changed everything. The way information is handled, the way that we share information, the way governments manipulate us. I remember in high school, in my social media or social sciences class, we talked about advertising. And the teacher asked us, what company spends the most amount of money on advertising? Everybody got it wrong. And it wasn't so much that it was what company. It was like, who spends the most on advertising? It was the government. The government spends by far the most amount of money on advertising, more than any large corporation. That's because they're trying to manage your perception, make you think in particular ways. It makes you wonder if we really do have free will. I came across this just within the last day, and I know that a lot of you don't like CBC. Nevertheless, I listen to everybody, independent, mainstream, government run, whatever, the communist, conservative, everything in between, and everything on the fringes. I listened to it all. And I came across this, how smartphones took over our lives. Now you can take back control. Want to listen to a little bit of this because, well, this is actually related to kids and smartphones primarily. It gives us a good reminder of where all of this stuff started in its current form.
On your mark, get set. We're riding on the internet, cyberspace set free. Hello, virtual reality.
Interactive appetite, searching for a website, a window to the world, got to get online.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
When the internet was brand new, this infomercial whet families' appetites to take a spin.
Now that I've gotten on the internet, I'd rather be on my computer than doing just about anything.
It's really cool.
The internet gave us a whole world of exciting new possibilities. So I guess this is a story of how it changed our lives. Maybe it will yours too.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
We installed the internet on our computer just a short time ago, and I haven't been able to get the kids off it ever since.
Not only do they play the typical computer games that all the kids enjoy, but their curiosity for learning has skyrocketed.
Having the internet in our home has had a great impact on our lives.
Little did they know what the impact would be on our lives 3 decades later. But even then, in the 90s, the Kids Guide carried a warning.
As a parent, I've never been happier than when my children ask their friends over for an internet computer party. I'd like to add a word about safety, though. You have to remember the internet is not a regulated environment, so the quality and accuracy of various informational offerings can differ quite a bit. There may even be a concern if your children should access some of them. So, go online with them on the net. Or set your Microsoft Internet Explorer browser to only accept G-rated sites.
The time of seeing the internet as this place of endless benefits, especially for kids, is long gone. And today that warning is more pressing than ever. Caitlin Regehr is an associate professor at University College London, specializing in digital literacy and the cultural impacts of social media. She's also the author of the new book, Smartphone Nation, Why We're All Addicted to Our Screens and What You and Your Family Can Do About It. Caitlin, good morning.
Good morning.
I know you've heard that infomercial a few times, but what do you think when you hear it today?
I mean, thank you so much for playing that. It's something that I open up my lectures at University College London with, because I think it's so important to remember the altruism and the promise of the early internet and some of the reasons why we just dove in head first and kind of in a way we don't have with anything else, decided to try it first before we test or regulate it. And, I would argue that we have now allowed this technology to, move far, far too quickly. It's become much more complex and sophisticated since those early days. And with that, we need a lot more caution.
Yeah, okay. We've got lots to talk about here this morning, but I am curious. You have your own young children. So what is their relationship to screens?
Yeah, so the guidance that parents have been given for the last 10 years really is something called screen time, which is this idea of controlling the dose to about 1 to 2.
And they're talking about kids here, but stay with me because she's going to just break this down into a very simple explanation or perspective that will help us all.
2 hours of day. And the thing about that guidance is that it accounted for the need to be physical and that time on screens probably meant you weren't moving around so much. But what it didn't account for was the mental health implications. And so screen time has only accounted for quantity of consumption, but not quality of consumption. And so when I'm, having these conversations with my very young children, I'm not just talking to them about the time spent on screens, which is still important, but also the quality of the content that they are engaging with. Is it educational content? Is it regulated content? Is it content, that we can have a conversation about, that we can collectively view together? Or is it content that closes them down? They are not on iPads. They are not on headphones. They are not on algorithmically driven platforms. And even from a really early age, I'm starting to talk to my daughters about what healthy quality consumption looks like, not just quantity.
And you're also talking, I understand, about algorithms. You went into your child's kindergarten class and talked about that. How did that go over?
So I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if I can teach what an algorithm is to a kindergarten class. And I went into my daughter's class and I brought in a cardboard box with a hole cut out of it. And I put it on one kid's head and I said, "You are a screen." And then I had a piece of yarn. And at the other end of that yarn, I handed it to a little girl. And I said to her, "Would you like to see a picture of a cat or a dinosaur?" And she chose cat. And so I ran a picture of a cat along the string to her. And then she got another cat. And then she got another cat. And another cat. And another cat. And then a scary cat. What I got all the kids to say was, algorithms start to make our choices for us. And we should want to make our own choices. And if kindergarten-aged children can understand that, so can we all. And actually, so should we all. I think we have a responsibility to.
And that's the key to really everything. Because it isn't like watching TV anymore. You're not making these choices entirely on your own anymore. She's pretty good. Let's listen.
So if we understand that at the age of 5 and judging by what you've just told me, it's possible. How can people control their algorithms, which I know you talk about a lot in the book, is a key piece to sort of regulating what you're fed?
I start with the premise that almost everything we consume is regulated. The food we eat, the medication we take, the cars we drive. We have consumer protections around these things. we don't have the same types of consumer protections in the digital space, in large part because we are not the consumers of tech. We are the product, or rather, our time and attention is the product which is being sold to advertisers. And what my work looks at is the way in which, through this.
And who's the advertiser? Who's the biggest advertiser out there? The government, and not just government, governments in waiting, those who want to become government.
This attention economy, this need to hold people's attention, hate, harm, and disinformation is often algorithmically prioritized because disinformation, unfortunately, is often more interesting than truth, and harm or things that hook into our most vulnerable points will often hold us there just a little bit longer. And it's that extra engagement, that extra attention, that extra time that advertisers are paying for. What I then talk about.
You know, the other thing that I think is worth noting here is that television also changed politics, the way politics is done. Because when television came along, political parties realized that, and television stations realized that politics could become a form of entertainment. And that's why you end up with Sunday talk shows. You end up with programs today like The View, which are completely politically oriented. They're not just talking about relationships or how to bake a pie. It's not a cooking show anymore. Everything, it seems, well, a good portion of what's on television these days is politically oriented, including late night comedy programs like The Tonight Show or The Jimmy Kimmel Show. They're all very politically oriented. And that's because it became very clear to television executives, media types, decades ago even, that politics was as emotionally based as something like religion and politics. Politics is distasteful to a lot of people in a secular society. And even if you use religion to try to drive programming, you'll find yourself sort of isolated. But politics is a more universal, or at least you can get a larger portion of the population watching that. That's why so much of what we're being fed today, and even in terms of entertainment, is politically oriented. And that's why you're getting the current conditions that we have online.
First of all, you need to decide whether you are happy with that. Are you happy just consuming whatever is fed to you?
Yeah. And I should also note that because it's entertainment, a lot of what you're being fed these days isn't just fact-based. It's designed to be a show. Make no mistake of that. Even what has been happening out at that ostrich farm, that has been very performative. They've been putting on a show for
you by way of our feeds. And if you're not, there are some things you can do. So one thing I talk about is first figuring out that you yourself are in some kind of a silo. I think we don't like to acknowledge that we are consuming often completely different content than the person sitting next to us on the bus or even our own sofa. And so one thing I suggest is that we open up our most frequently used application, whatever that is, and scroll through a normative period of usage with our partner. Now, if that feels super cringy, because to a lot of people it does, it feels like horrifying, it's worth considering why that is. These are hyper personalized forms of viewing. It is not like watching television with our family. It is not like going to the movie theater with the community. So if your partner says to you, you're getting a lot of ads for plastic surgery, is that the best thing for you? And then you decide. You decide what you want more of and what you want less of, and then you actively start to game your algorithm, or what some call practicing algorithmic resistance, accordingly.
At what age do you start talking to your children?
Okay. Now, I also, just to put that in perspective, she's very right. Not everybody's being fed information based on what the algorithm determines they need to feed you, or what they want to feed you. I have a gentleman who comes to my door about once a week. He's a Jehovah's Witness. I know, don't let them in the house. They never leave. Super nice guy. And I love talking with him. I must be the only guy on the block who doesn't hide when they come, but I look forward to his visit once a week, because we engage in these deep conversations that last generally about a half an hour every time he stops by. He came by, and he usually has somebody with him, and he had another fella that I hadn't met yet, and and he always asks me what I'm doing. He's very curious about this program. And I said, well, we've been doing this stuff on the ostrich farm. Are you aware of the ostrich story? They'd heard something about it, but they really weren't aware, didn't really know much at all about the ostrich story. And it just reinforces for me that because I've been covering it, I get a lot of ostrich content, but other people get virtually none. I said to my wife, this goes back a week and a half ago, before I heard this, I asked her, do you see any of these posts on the ostriches? Nope. She doesn't get the ostrich stuff. I get nothing but ostrich stuff from the ostrich farm, where the call took place and the political controversy and all of that, because the algorithm is feeding it to me, mostly on Facebook, but also on X, mostly on Facebook. Facebook is ostrich central, because whatever Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg are up to, it is a pro-Trump, pro-MAGA thing. He's in Trump's back pocket, no question about it. Not so much the Canadian government's, kind of the opposite. They're at odds with what's going on with the Canadian government. You've seen that, because they refused to comply with the Online News Streaming Act, which would have forced them to pay for news content on Facebook. So they just said, then we're not going to carry any news content, because we don't want to pay the fees. That has really changed Facebook in Canada. And so they've been feeding a crap load of this ostrich stuff, because they're devoid of actual news. So the independent, it's not independent. It's coordinated. A lot of it's paid influencers. It's a managed campaign, and they have free reign with very little opposition, if any, or any alternative points of view, any alternative perspectives in a real sense on Facebook. They dominate, because the news media is not there. I'm not even on Facebook, because we're Maverick News. And there's some other reasons too that I won't get into here. But that's why they dominate on Facebook, and it gives you a skewed reality. I get fed nothing but ostrich stuff on Facebook, but my wife, nothing. Which just shows and reinforces exactly what we're hearing here on this CBC podcast.
About that, for instance, can teenagers, I'm sure they can understand, but will they follow through and game the system in such a way?
When I'm talking about gaming your algorithm, I'm talking about actively searching for things you want, quickly moving past things you don't engage with things that make you feel bad, and then, really cleaning up your feed, or what I call a deep clean or a spring clean of your social media applications, where you actively unfollow things you don't want to see. Now, yes, teenagers can do this if they are already on social media. It's worth talking to them about it. One thing I will say is that because these feeds are so personal, you need to really think about whether it's too personal to ask your teenager to share this. Of course, you will learn a lot lot about an individual based on what is being fed to them. And that has implications in terms of identity, in terms of sexuality. So you have to decide what's right for your family in terms of this sharing. If it feels too much, if you have an older teenager, you can also do a different exercise where you bring in 3 pieces of content every week. One that made you feel good, one that made you feel bad, one that made you question something. And you have a conversation about what you're seeing. And all of this, what we're trying to do is to open up these silos so that it's not so hyper-personalized and actually decide that what we see on screens is something that we talk about. It's not something that we have to hide away up in our bedroom, under the covers, into the wee hours of night.
I think it's in those silos too, and you raise this in the book, the concern about some of the voices on gaming devices, for instance, that you'll meet people that you don't know and they're suddenly talking about racist viewpoints that you weren't aware of and suddenly you are. How can all of this become harmful when you're in a silo and you may not be acknowledging that you're in that silo?
So what you're talking about is when these silos become echo chambers. And that's when we're worried that people are microdosing on harm. And so it's not about one post, one time. It's about a continuous stream of content that starts to normalize certain ideas. And this is not just the case for teenagers. Adults are not immune to this. We are all moving into echo chambers. But you're right. It's also not just happening on phones. You brought up gaming. If your kid is gaming on a headset where they're playing with other people, they can be talking to adults. There also can be geolocator devices on games that actually show people where your kid is. And so we might not like that this harm is out there. In the same way, we don't like that there are cars that, our kid could get hit by, but we do teach them to cross the street and look both ways. And we do educate ourselves about those harms so that we can effectively help our kids. And that's, I think, where we need to get to with this.
Yeah, we're talking here about kids who are unwittingly putting themselves in harm's way, potentially, by being in these various situations. But also, I think parents sometimes unwittingly put their kids in harm's way through something I know we now call sharenting. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so sharenting is the process through which parents share their children. Often these discussions are centered around young people and the age in which they should or should not get a smartphone. But a lot of the datification of kids is happening much, much earlier. And that goes from, the very early birth announcement. And in fact, that child may have been shown as an ultrasound scan or even a positive pregnancy test before that. That is how early we've begun to share our kids. And it's important to think about what the implications are for that. One is that if you have a public account and you are sharing your child on that public account, there are some risks involved in that. I mean, there have been campaigns about back to school photos where you take a picture of your kid and you say the school that they go to every day with their name and that gets posted publicly. There is, of course, risks associated with that, but there's also risks for their adult self. So Barclays Bank has come out to say that by the year 2030, 2/3 of the identity fraud will be carried out against children who have already been shared online. And so I think it's really important for us as parents, before we place blame solely on teenagers, right, and their usage, is that we actually start to think about our own usage around our really young kids. And we also start to expand the frame of what digital engagement looks like. It's not just about phones. It's also about tablets. We know that it's somewhere between 80 and 90% of kids from the age of 3 are on YouTube, an algorithmically driven platform that often sits outside of the social media debates. And that we are actually programming kids to engage with short form, often low quality content from a very early age.
I have to just say this because I was reading your book and I read the section about YouTube, and I have twin 7-year-old boys, and they go on kids' YouTube all the time when we say they can have some screen time. And I talked to them about, I would really like you to watch something with a narrative. Well, what's a narrative? So we had that conversation, and then they were talking about maybe we can do YouTube Tuesdays. So now we're sort of thinking about doing something. So I did have that chat with them.
I am thrilled to hear that. You are starting to engage them in critical digital literacy from a very early age. And that's fantastic. That's where we want to get to. That is where we want to get to.
One thing I do think about a lot too is, and this is a conversation, of course, I am not yet having with my children, but how do you get into the conversation about online porn? Because
well, I don't know. We'll just let that slide. We don't need to go there, but if you want to, you can go listen to the rest of that podcast. We listened to about half of it there. And I thought it was valuable because it gives a little bit of background, some history, and shows where we're at today. I'll put the link to the podcast right there. There you go. So feel free to go listen to the stuff about porn. It doesn't get that racy, really. But political porn, definitely on display in Mexico. Was yesterday's protest enough to unseat the government? Haven't seen that Sheinbaum is gone. But look at the wording around these posts. Gen Z is rising up in Mexico because they are the first generation to have access to enough information to know that their entire government works for the cartels. The entire government. All of them, apparently. Holy crap. The entire Mexican government is part of the big drug cartel problem. You see? Do you think maybe this social media influencer might just have a bit of a political agenda? Table salt? Don't know who runs that. Oh, look at that. Amazing. I'm getting another ostrich feed. From the news organization, which seems to have its own political agenda because they're going to avenge the ostriches. They're not just going to report on them. They're going to avenge them if you donate now. The Ostrich Avengers. Well, there's a sight to behold. Are they going to wear spandex, leotards? Will we get to see Ezra Levant's bulging muscles in his tights? The Ostrich Avengers. Oh my God. See, I told you, it's a show. It's a freaking show. Everybody knows it, especially Hunter Biden. And, at one time, everybody thought that his daddy was in charge and was controlling everything, and maybe so. Not so today. Hunter Biden appears to be paranoid. Or is he paranoid, or is he just recognizing reality within the matrix? Because he says that everyone should be scared of Mossad, CIA, and NSA. He says that even when you think they're not listening or can't listen, they can listen. Let's listen to what Hunter Biden has to say. You decide, paranoid or just being realistic. Oh, hang on.
Out there. Sure. You know what? You should be scared of Mossad. This kind of idea that there's these all-powerful agencies that do all of these things out there. Sure. You know what? You should be scared of Mossad. Everybody should be. Because I don't want to get on the wrong side of them. You should be scared of the CIA. But more than anything, you should be scared of the NSA. Because if If you don't think that they have the capacity to listen to you, even if your phone is off and shove it under a couch, and they do, okay? But the fact of the matter is that I don't think that any of them are stupid enough to actually have like some kind of a written contract with somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, who was clearly a sociopath, who's clearly a pedophile, who was clearly engaged in a pathological need to rape children. You know.
So there's the son of the former president, who seemed to have a real position of privilege for quite a while, and maybe even profited from his daddy's position. And even he is afraid of digital surveillance and the new reality online inside the matrix, whatever that is. Perception management. I'm for peace. They're all for peace, even when they're going to war. Oh, are you going to war with Venezuela? Oh, probably not. But I'm not saying when or if, for sure. You never know, but probably not. Why do you have the aircraft carrier off the coast of Venezuela? Oh, well, it's just we had to send the sailors on a 3-hour tour. I don't know. Could it be because he actually does want to go to war with Venezuela? Or he already is at war with Venezuela? Well, what does Nicolas Maduro say? Well, he doesn't want a war either. And says he's not a narco-terrorist. Sheinbaum says she's not a narco-terrorist. Maduro says that he's all for peace. And then he stood up within the last day and sang John Lennon's Imagine to a huge crowd. So he's talk about perception management.
Peace, peace, peace. Hacer todo por la paz. Alfred Nazaret, ¿cómo era la canción de John Lennon? Imagine us people. Mira, son jodedores, vale.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. Living for today. It isn't hard to do. Imagine all the people.
Que viva la paz.
Nothing to kill or die for.
Well, I'm all for peace. I can imagine quite a bit, to quote Han Solo. And I can also imagine things that may be real and things that are all fake. See you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side.
Biden's a bot, Charlie's alive. Elvis flips burgers on the Lower East Side. 10 Trumps mask up on your phone. Shilling mean coins by remote drone. Graphene needles in your veins. Chemtrail sugar fries your brain. George Floyd's American hologram pie. Don't trust your lying eyes. It's all fake. It's all fake. The moon is a hoax. Give your head a shake. It's all fake.
break.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.